Hello and welcome to part 3 of the weapon trace tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to show you the weapon trace functionality for the sweet spots, the bounce percentages, and a little bit of the damage logic. So let's start this by opening up the weapon trace, and under the melee trace we are going to actually process this hit. So on the hits we go drag out and press F for a for each loop, and as per usual I am doing this wrong already. I need a branch before we do this, because we might get null references if we don't. So let's say we don't hit anything at all, then this will get a null reference trying to reference array elements that do not exist. So in here we can say break hit result, the hit actor, and say apply damage. Now there's multiple ways of doing this, of course. I won't be covering it too much, but there is the apply damage part of the this is built into the engine, but I have always found this to be very unreliable and not very modular, and this damage type class it just doesn't really work. So instead of that I tend to make my own using blueprint interfaces, and we call this on our hit actor. And speaking of hit actors, this is the actor I'm going to hit, the training pole, and I'm going to go into the class settings, have it implement my trace interface, and on event apply damage I'm going to print string, and he's going to say owie with an exclamation mark. There we go. So let's try hitting him. Oops. And you can see he printed owie all of, what was it, 6 times? Because we did in fact hit him multiple times. This is because we are drawing so many traces. Now if my FPS were lower, I wouldn't hit him nearly as many times, but still too many times. And this is because we never check in our weapon trace. We just loop over every hit, but we can hit the same thing multiple times. So we now just need to check if we have hit this actor once already. So to do this, I'm going to create a new array called hit actors. This would of course be an array of actors. And let's make a new function and call this check first hit. It will have an input for the hit, which is the hit result. We break the hit result and get the actor. First, I'm going to check if it is valid to avoid any null references and errors that may occur if it is not. And then check if it is already contained inside of the hit actors array. If this is the case, then we add a return node with a return value first hit. Whoops. As false. And if it is true, we're going to get our hit actors array and say add unique. You could just say add instead of add unique, but I prefer this, but you don't need to because we are already checking if it is contained inside of it. I just have add unique just in case. And hook this up as well, and return node true, because this is the first time we hit this actor. Then back in the melee trace, we will check. We can get rid of this. Oh no, we don't, because we still need to apply damage to the hit actor. We will check first time hit. and only if this is true will we apply damage. So let's compile and save this and try it out. As you can see, he only says owie once, but the problem is he only ever says it once, because we never reset this hit actors array. But luckily we already have a reset traces function, so all we need to do is get the hit actors and say clear array, and voila, this will now work. Watch me say it and watch it not work. Of course, that would be typical. Or I could miss. One more time, and it just barely hit. But as you can see, it hits more times than just the once, but only once per attack. So then, let's get on to using the sweet spot and the bounce percentages. Now, before I do the logic for those, I'm first going to edit the trace color, because you can actually set the trace color based on this percentage, which I always found very useful. This is why I chose cyan in the first place, because that is the color I used in the introduction video for the regular trace. I'm going to move this down a bit. There we go. So let's start with the bounce percentage. So we need to multiply the bounce percentage by the number of trace points and subtract 1, because otherwise this will have one too many trace points that isn't actually part of the bounce percentage. And then see if it is greater, no wait, less equal to the array index here. And I'm going to use a select color here. If this is true, that means it will be red. If it is false, then we put another select color and calculate this same thing for the sweet percentage, except it is slightly different. In here we have to subtract 1 minus the sweet percentage, and then multiply this by the number of points again. Then we need to check if this is greater than or equal to our array index, because this one will count from the top. And if it is, then we use green. And if it is not, we will use cyan. So let's compile and save this, and let's try it out. Wait, no, not yet. I have to actually set these percentages. So let's have, oh, I never tried out the extend amount. Let's try an extend amount of 30 just to show it off. The bounce percentage will be 20%, so it's 0.2. The sweet percent will be 20%, so it's 0.2. And that's not going to work because I have very few trace points. Let's try 6, and let's try 0.3 and 0.3. All right, let's see if this works. And indeed it does. No, it does not. Wait, figured it out. This is the wrong way around. This should be whether or not it is less equal. The array index is less equal to the calculated percentage. So this should now work. Let me reset this. Bounce percent was 0.3, sweet percent was 0.3, and let's try again. There we go. The top is now a sweet spot, and the bottom is now a bounce percentage. So let's try the following. Let's go here into the first time hit. No, wait, after first time hit, we will first need to check if it is part of bounce percent. So let me add a branch here. I will add a comment and say bounce percent. If true, then let's make a new event dispatcher, call this on bounce, or maybe weapon bounce and call this here. Oops. And if false, I need to check if it might be part of the sweet spot percent. And this part is probably where you would do some things related to the damage functions. So in the apply damage, I'm going to say, put an input here called sweet. And let's say in string, select string, pick a, if it was sweet, yowzers. If I could type yowzers. And the regular will just be owie. Let's see, this doesn't have to be a branch in my case, but I'm going to keep this just in case. And we need to call the weapon bounce in our character. So let's go to the event graph. If you click here on AC weapon trace, you will have the events on weapon bounce. Add this and put it, I don't know, over here. And then I happen to have a montage, so I need to get my mesh, play montage. The montage being bounce, weapon bounce. I recorded this a long time ago. This won't, I never bothered to clean it up because it didn't look very good. But this is the weapon bounce. If I do this, I do in fact need to, not the input buffer, I need to get the weapon trace and also call reset traces, because this doesn't happen naturally. This only happens at the start and the end, which reminds me, actually, you don't need to do this. No, you don't, because this will get set at the start of the weapon trace notify state. So let's go ahead and try this out. First, I'm going to try the sweet spot. He says yowzers when I hit him with the sweet spot. And when I don't, whoops, that just bounced off of something that it shouldn't have. Well, at least we know the bounce is working. I can no longer attack because of this part, the is attacking. So let me set these. These are all part of the input buffer system that I had. But it is important still to keep these kinds of things here. Let's check first if in the weapon trace we are doing the correct part of the bounce percentage here. Bounce percent, oh, this is a mess. Hit actor, I need to know if this is a static mesh or not. Let me check. Get class. Check if this is equal to a static mesh. There's a heck of a lot of different types, and this really depends on your project. But I'm going to go with static mesh actor. I think I'm going to try. And so these two at the same time. So if it is both part of the bounce percent that we hit with, and we hit, the hit actor is of class static mesh actor, we should bounce. So this should no longer bounce because this is a static mesh component. Or I could miss. That's also an option. Indeed, it did not bounce, and this, bam, it bounces. There you go. Now then, there is one other slightly more niche problem that occurs here. I've actually noticed this in some games that I have recently played, is that if you have a thin wall, you can punch through it, or you can hit actors through it because it never stops the traces. So if you check here, whoops, if I disable the bounce, and try hitting this through the wall, I can. And you can probably imagine why that isn't a good idea to have. So, what I can do is, in the weapon trace, we can check whether the bounce percentage is true, or if it is just this. So let's change this up. Instead of here, let's add another branch to see if it is part of the branch. If it is part of the bounce percent. And first, we check if we hit a static mesh. So we hit a static mesh, and we are part of the bounce, so we call weapon bounce. We hit a static mesh, but we are not part of the bounce, so we just execute a return node. And what the return node does is it just finishes execution of the function. It doesn't do anything else anymore. So it won't be calculating any more of the trace points. And this is why it is important to have the start location as the first one that you trace from to the tip of the sword. Because if you do it the other way around, you cannot have this working. So let's go ahead and try this out. Right now I'm going to hit this wall, and it still went through. Okay, I figured it out. We need to do this before we check the first hit. So, let me figure this out. The bounce should be here. Also, this is no longer the bounce. This here is the bounce, but I don't need the comment. And then we check for the sweet. Let's try again. Yes, as you can see, the trace now ends before I can pass through the wall. Which means I am now unable to hit anything that I cannot actually see. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful. I know it was a bit all over the place, but I do hope you've managed to make a useful system that you can either just use as is or adapt and expand or modify as you see fit. Because that is the ultimate goal of my tutorials, is not necessarily to give you a system, but to give you an understanding of how to make systems like these. So you can expand upon them, make your own, and eventually just not need a tutorial anymore. And maybe you can even make tutorials like I did. So with that said, if you have any suggestions, any questions, any ideas for how to, any ideas for other tutorials you might need or want to see, then feel free to leave those in the comments. I'm always open to suggestions and feedback like that. And I hope to see you again next time. Good luck.